Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the performance audit training, which is organized by the USAID Short-Term Assistance to Improve Public Financial Management Reform, the STAR project, in collaboration with the Department of Management Audit of Ministry of Finance. To conduct the opening remarks, may I cordially invite Mr. Saliya Dharmawardana, the Director Training of Department of Management Audit of Ministry of Finance.
Good morning to all of you. On behalf of Director General, Department of Management Audit, I welcome all of you for the successive fourth program conducted by the USAID STAR project, joint collaboration with our department. I think we have already conducted 3 programs. This is the fourth program. See, this is the second program with Mr. Robert Viernum. I warmly welcome and make my highest appreciation for extending your expert knowledge for the development of our audit officers' capacity. And also, it's my duty to thanks to Mr. Barula. I think without Mr. Barula, I don't think this is success. And also, because of the US people, they extend their support for the development of our country, very particularly the capacities of the public officers. In line with this development of capacities of the public officers, I think the auditor's capacity is very much essential. Very particularly, the continuous development of the capacity of our auditors are essential to maintain the good governance of our country. So the present government highly emphasizes the need of good governance and the involvement of public officers in arresting all kind of corruption, all kind of inefficiencies and bad practices. So therefore, these all programs are aimed to support the government vision. I also emphasize in our training program what we want to maintain as a continuous development training program. So this is not the end of the training program. So I believe the USAID or some other organization, we have to we are expecting their support to continue this kind of programs for the next year as well.
Okay, it's the seminar. You got this in color. It's divided into 3 different days. Day 1, day 2, and day 3. So if we look at that, day 1 is basically, what do we call it? It's background information. Background information. So today, we'll talk about, we got topics here: performance auditing, project auditing, logical framework, and tomorrow we'll actually look at the skills building. So it's similar to what we tried to do on performance auditing, and we'll do the same thing. And then on the final day, we're going to put it all together, okay? All right, here, part of the whole thing, where's our quiz? Why don't we distribute our quiz after we get done talking here? Okay, yeah, quiz. All right, and the quiz is actually, and what is it? It's interesting. It's actually an indication it's some sort of performance auditing. It's a performance auditing tool because it checks 2 things. The quiz is, it's also a performance auditing tool. It not only, it measures 2 things, and what do you think the 2 things are? It measures actually 2 things on performance. It measures performance what? It measures the performance of my ability, or quasi the ability of the materials to teach you something. Okay. So the number 1, it measures the ability, not necessarily the ability of me, the ability of him, because I know my ability. And the second one is it measures so that, and on the other side, it actually it establishes a baseline. Anyway, it measures, so we take the baseline, you take the test today, this morning, and then you'll take the test, inshallah, at the end of the seminar, and we'll see if you learned anything, okay? Okay, so as I explained here, background, skills building, and then tools. All right, here, performance, and this is the standard, what is performance? Performance.
The accomplishment of a given task measured against preset known standards for accuracy, completeness, cost, and speed. In a contract, performance is deemed to be the fulfillment of an obligation in a manner that releases the performer from all liabilities under the contract.
Okay, so that's performance. So what is this? A release from all liabilities and they're deemed to fulfill. That's performance. And then we're also going to talk more about, because what is it? What is it, and particularly in an elected official? I mean, this comes across, I think one of the things we're going to talk about is the PIFA. We'll talk about PIFA on the last day. We'll talk about PIFA. In fiduciary, I mean, this comes into, government officials. They're entrusted. I think we talked about a little bit, if I remember correctly, in procurement. It's the responsibility, if they say, it's not my job, blah, blah, why is, we have, the United States has a Congress, the United States has a president. So if they have a fiduciary obligation, based on a constitution, Sri Lanka has a constitution, why is there a PM? Why is there a permanent secretary? They have an obligation to do their duty, right? It sounds interesting, but this is it. A legal obligation of one party to act in the best interest of the other. The obligatory party is typically a fiduciary, that is someone entrusted to care money and property. I don't know, I haven't really, actually I never get out of the hotel, but if you do have lawyers here, you see the guys you got courts. It's a fiduciary responsibility. And that's what it all comes back to in any case. Why do you have a government? Well, you have a government, and I can't really overemphasize this, but they have a fiduciary responsibility, right? It's their duty. Okay, it's again, why, it's, at the end of the day, why do they go to the State House or do they go to the Parliament? They're supposedly, if you have a democracy, it's supposed to be the people, right? It's the people. Anyway, here, this INTOSAI is the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. All right, here, the guideline sets out 5 main parts. Okay, we'll look here, fundamentals of performance auditing, value for money auditing, and then some public sector applications. And again, there's also the shared drive folder. Anyway, here, performance audit. Way to execute, control, attain insight of running outcomes of activities. Okay, there's 3 here, there's words at the bottom, there's 3 things. What does it say here? It says, what's the second word?
Imagination.
And what's the third word?
Analytical skills.
Okay, and that's kind of, why don't we think about that? Why don't, it's kind of interesting. It's good that we kind of went through forensic auditing, we went through this performance or procurement auditing, but now we're going to do the performance because it all rolls into one here. Transparency, drivers for public reform. All right, because here, legitimacy and trust, the word trust means you put into your notes that trust and fiduciary and trust fiduciary, it goes together. Performance auditing contributes to strengthening by producing public, reliable information on effectiveness, efficiency, and economy. All right, fine, go. And you're going to see, we'll look at, we're going to look up and down, backward and forward, look several times at the ideas of efficiency, economy, and effectiveness. There's simple words to say. We'll also look at benefit, cost benefit. Here, this is the traditional stuff. It comes in here. bureaucratic style inefficient management. All right, and here the new public management, market-driven approach, effective management, and then here good governance. Performance-based public management. This comes from some, World Bank, the IMF, all these other good people that make all these good things to say. They said here performance-based public management. I believe I put into the Dropbox for you this European Union has a very good thing, and actually it's applicable for internal auditors. It's PFIC, Public Internal Financial Controls. It's a good booklet. It's in the Dropbox. Performance auditing works with the same performance management concepts used by program managers to plan, monitor, and evaluate are used to achieve public policy. Performance audit definition, independent examination, with due regard to economy and the aims of the aims of leading to improvement is the important part here. All right, this is here, leading to improvement, the aim of leading to improvements. That's kind of where the value added, they talk about value for money. We'll look later, and I could say right now here, this value for money concept, it actually happens to be, comes from the British area. Their sphere of influence, I guess you were occupied at one time by Great Britain, right? Anyway, this is INTESAI 3000. What is guidelines? Guidelines taken into account relevant INTESAI standards based on generally accepted performance audit, so forth and so on. So this is again, you could scope in here, okay, measure assessment of the effects or impact of management, measures on the 3 E's. It says here the effect that, what does manager get, does the manager, does the mayor, does the, why do you have a president? Why do you have a PS? All right, and here, this should in turn, who are made accountable for the performance of their organization. All right, anyway, here's scope. Measures, general categories, scope of performance here. And we'll look at each one of these, but we'll also policy. I mean, it's a policy wrong. When I put this thing together, as I say, I said, what should we look? We'll look at policy, and now you could question the policy. Is it a good policy or is it a bad policy? You could do performance auditings on all of this, on none of this, on one or two of these things. Execution, organization, and again, we'll give you some, how long does it take things? Resources have been acquired economically. We looked at that with the procurement, and it says here that evaluating the measures instituted or lack, so the absence. All right, next, what do we got here? Scope. Reasons for inadequacy, causes, reasons, the causes, what's behind, what's causing this? The uneconomical procurement provides an opportunity for improvement. All right, and this is this brings it. This provides an opportunity for improvement. Who? Does it provide an opportunity for what? This is a multiple choice answer. Is it an opportunity to improve the organization that's being audited? Yes, no, yes, no. Yeah, well, it also provides an opportunity for the audit department. It also improves the opportunity for the audit department to get, because you can go to the government and you could say, we saved, well, look at that. I didn't notice. This is amazing. It's like a home theater. It actually, you can get more money for the audit department to pay higher salaries and more resources, correct? Economy, acquiring the right sources, acquiring resources. And here it says sound principles and practices. But that really, that doesn't really have much to do with, many times that's why we looked at forensic auditing. If the guys that do everything correctly, nobody does everything correctly. Efficiency, optimal relationship, effective utilization. Okay, there's a lot of words here, but the important optimal relationship and effective utilization. Okay, effectiveness. Yeah, here, we picked out here with the intended impact. All right, and this is where, again, we'll look at one of the groups of discussion points we have is about analyzing policy, looking at indicators. Yeah, I mean here, there's intended effects, intended impact. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? Intended effects, intended impact. So intent, because there's something that happens accidentally, or there's something that happens on purpose, right? So the intent means that if there's a preconception, a thought, and that comes down in policies, objectives, again, all right, and again, there's one piece of, there should be a paper out in the hall for you if you haven't gotten it already, but we'll look at that, and we'll look at these things. Intent, particularly in performance auditing is very much intent. Okay, here, performance auditing, traditional auditing. This is basically out of performance-based auditing. Here, you could read through these later. Here, it's symptom-based. All right, I mean that's why we had so much fun doing the forensic auditing stuff. That was kind of symptom-based. What we learned about forensic auditing a little bit, we learned how to identify symptoms. Yes. All right, that's why we'll look inshallah later today about indicators and goals and objectives and all that stuff. Yeah, here it says here, audit criteria, more subjective but often based on best or subjective. Here, subjective. Here, major issues. Outputs and outcomes are hard to define. And that's one of the reasons we're going to look at policy analysis, we'll look at indicators. As I say, there should be a sheet available. We'll pass that out. It's got all this information on it. You could take it away and look at it. National plans may not be leaked to strategic plans for spending units. That's interesting. The whole idea is to, strategic development plan and all this other stuff, it should all roll together. It should all go together. Your program and activities may not be implemented due to budgetary funding constraints. Okay, these are three major items. I was hoping to talk about how these things, how the National Development Plan links into program budgeting or whatever you do, activity-based budgeting. Audit universe here covers the full spectrum. Yeah, so you could do any kind of performance auditing. And then probably, okay, political, analytic, creative, the creative stuff moves things forward. The analytical stuff, the creative skills generates the idea. How can I audit the effectiveness of X, Y, Z? Please, that's where the creative skills comes in. The analytical skills really comes into effect. The analytical skills, taking that out and putting it into some kind of tangible results. Okay, and we're going to look tomorrow. We'll look again at some things like how to measure work effectiveness, what a bottleneck is, how processes work. And the political whole thing requires political skills, performance management, performance auditing. And as I said earlier here, are things being done the right way, and are the right things being done? That's two basic questions that you get. Continue. And there's always, it always comes to, I probably said before in our seminars, how do you define? Who defines what's right and what is the right way? What are the right things, right? What's right? All right, I mean, that's a fundamental, and that comes into our fiduciary. We talked about fiduciary responsibilities, clear structure of goals, and appropriate priorities. This is where we'll talk about performance indicators. Reporting requirements too. I mean, that's the whole reporting requirements. Is there general cost awareness here? Putting citizens' needs in focus. Is there a clear distribution of responsibility? So, all right, and it comes into three things: who, what, where, when. Who, why, who, and how. That's it there. Okay. Evaluating here. Cost of the information, accuracy, and valid measurements need to exist in evaluating. Okay, performance auditing, value for money auditing, operational auditing. Basically, what do I got? I got equals, equals, equals. It's basically all the same thing. All right, and as I say, I mean, this value for money is interesting. I told you it's a British concept. Value for money auditing, again, comes out of, you'll see your Parliament mentioned, it's British. It says encourages accountability and best practices, answerable, productive government. All right, it's interesting here that the word here is objective. And before we said that performance auditing is really subjective, it's not that necessarily objective. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but let me say the reason here, you have to establish some sort of metrics to measure against. Okay, and that's why we'll look at policy. If the policy of the city government of Colombo is to make sure that the traffic moves through the town, that's kind of the objective. There's a metric. How long does it take for traffic to move through town? So you have to really get to a point to make sure that you do objective measurements. Okay, next thing here. One of your colleagues here was mentioning about audit, how long it takes audits to get to, you do performance audits in Sri Lanka, and the people that you've done the performance auditing on have long changed and long moved away. Here we'll look at the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. And here, what does it say? It says, call attention anything that he considers to be significant in a nature that should be brought to the attention of the House of Commons. Audit is superimposed on an accountability framework. And what does it say here? Accountability is to answer for what you have accomplished or not. That is of significance or value, right? The government has an obligation to account to Parliament on its stewardship of taxpayers' money and the discharge of its responsibilities. And it's kind of interesting too, I mean, you could say, make a comment on taxpayers' money. Regrettably, not everyone in the United States pays taxes, so. Not all the people pay taxes, so, but the government does have responsibilities, and those are usually put out in the Constitution. All right, again, and this is a Canadian, you'll get the Canadian Auditor General's annual report. It's in the box. And it's also, I think it's outside for you to look at. But here, principles that guide audit in achieving desired result. Make a difference, okay? Yes. And here, here we don't have to do all this, but here, achieve a positive and measurable impact. A positive and measurable, okay? All stages are 3 criteria: significance of the area, relevance, and auditability. And let's we could look at the one point here, the auditability, the last one, the one in brown. What does that actually mean? That this is where we talked about what the factors. We said creativity, analytical skills, and political skills. Because I personally, after working almost all of my professional life as an auditor, the auditability defines whether or not the area is amenable to audit. That's your job, to make it amenable to audit. All right, that's, we looked at forensic auditing. It was what? Putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It's a question of effort, interest, ability, and energy. Design here, audit priority, designed to identify emerging issues, major changes. Here, value for money priority, and this is what the Canadians believe. Okay. Information for analysis is sought deputy ministers, senior officials, so forth and so on here. Academics, information for analysis is sought from, and it goes on here. Where do we get the information? Academic world, government world. Okay. Again, the Canadian approach. You wanted to know, how does this line up with what's in Sri Lanka? Yeah, here. So again, the Canadian here, entity program audit to provide substantial review of an operation of a department or an agency, government-wide audit. They do actually and you'll see in the report, again, you got the whole report. You can see they do audit notes, single issues, mini audits, product of another. When you're doing a regular audit, there may be a performance note. There's an audit advisory committee, establishes all the VFM audits, and then here you can see outside advisors, experts. Once again, I mean, this is how the Supreme Audit Board in Canada works. They have the Public Accounts Committee, calls for performance audits. The audits are done by the Supreme Audit Board. So that's the reasonable fairness presentation, whether the report. So that who's the cat and who's the mouse, okay? Each value from us must result in a report that clearly communicates to the readers the objectives of professional standards used, so forth and so on. Again, when we look at the, I'll leave it up to your, when we look at the audit reports that I went through and pulled out for you, you can answer, what is the objective nature? You'll see that it states what's going to be done, the professional standards used. It's not only auditing standards, it could be professional engineering standards for traffic management. It could be professional standards for quality of water. It could be professional standards for, it happened, I was about 3 weeks ago, I was in Tanzania. I was talking to the Auditor General, or the Assistant Auditor, Internal Auditor General, and he said, yeah, I have 500 internal auditors working all throughout Tanzania, but I have nobody I only have 2 people who do engineering type audits, large projects. They're doing, projects, building bridges, things that, he's got 500 people, he's got 2 people that are qualified to do operational audits. Which is interesting, it's great, but there's, out of the 500 people, there's probably some of the people are motivated to learn, right? You don't have to be a professional engineer. Each value audit must be clear. And again, when we look at the audit reports, you can go and pull out, and we're going to give you an option. I mean, we'll pass the idea with the whole case study is to pass these reports out to you, and then you can go in and identify here, observations made, recommendations made to guide corrective action. And that's kind of where it comes into, and we'll look at the only deal with matters of significance. It's interesting, I mean, oftentimes you find, again, I'm looking at something similar. It's in Tanzania here. What kind of audit point, are there significant audit points? Are the points significant? Is there any value in them? What's the impact? So the significance of the audit point. And there's an important word here. It says what? Convincing for the reader. Convincing for the reader. Convincing for the reader. Yeah, I should say. When I was a young auditor, when I first started out doing audit work, one of the things I worked on was writing effective audit points, and also making effective presentations. One of the things we had to do is present this stuff in an effective way. And if you remember, what did I say this morning about our examination, our little quiz, right? I said it's got 2 things, 2 factors. And it's supposed to test what? It's supposed to test not only my ability to transfer the information, but your ability to receive it, right? So it's a satellite, right? I mean, and that's kind of the important thing. It's interesting, again, if I could go back to, currently I'm looking at a project in Tanzania. 94% of the audit points that were made by the internal auditors are not accepted. 94, oh my God, 94%, there's something wrong with the people. So here, as I say, I just said that 94% of the audit points that these auditors in Tanzania that are making for the local government are not accepted. So who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? Is it the fact that 94% of the points are not accepted? Is it the problem of the person being audited? Or is it the problem of the person that's doing the audit? Yeah, here, again going back, this is a Canadian, what does it say right there in reference to what you said in the box? And reported to Parliament on a timely basis. This is embedded in the Canadian law, right? And reported to Parliament, not 6 months later, not 9 months later, not 10 months, on a timely basis. All right, anyway, so here, again, the Brits, what do they say? Analyze, audit, identify cost drivers. We'll look at that. I mean, that's one thing. And analyze, identify their key cost drivers, priorities, stated objectives, and targets. That's good. So, and then, again, we'll spend some time talking about it, but that's one of the reasons we gave you this. Yeah, but, and oftentimes you find out this is where, you find, particularly in a governmental situation, in a governmental situation, you find out people don't, politicians or budget people involved in budgeting or people involved in management, particularly people involved in planning, budgeting, they don't really know this, cost drivers and all this other. You know, I could refer to practical example. I have exactly this situation in Georgia that the people that are involved in setting up programs and program budgeting, they have no idea about cost drivers and all these. And as I was discussing, we were discussing that when developing study proposals, external experts, panel of experts to provide comments. And if you remember, I mean, in forensic auditing, I think the important thing is to identify we know what we know and we know what we don't know. As far as if you need, doing a performance audit, if it's necessary to go out and have an engineer or someone else go, a doctor or whatever. But at the very least, I mean, as an audit, you want to be able to, again, the word is, the expression, to know what we know and know what we don't know. If we could identify what we do not know, then we could find somebody who will find out what we do not know. And we could give you another example, going back to our little test that was prepared late. We could say, it's not necessarily knowing the right answer, it's being able to explain why the right answer is correct and why the wrong answer is wrong. That's the important part of a test. That's really where it displays competency or capability. That's where explain why things are wrong rather than why they're right. That's the real trick. The challenge is to select the right issues. Okay, is there potential to bring about positive change? Look at the last one, positive change. If the information, so what do we do if the information, it says, is the information available? So what do we do if the information is not available? If the information is not available, find it, right? Go out and find it. That's the trick. That's why you're getting paid. That's why you're an auditor. If the information is always available, I can guarantee you that the information is always available. It's just a matter of asking the right questions to the right people in the right way, right? Or you could ask the wrong questions to the right people in the wrong way and still get an answer. It's all how you go about it. So that was the one that I pointed out here is there a potential to bring about positive change? I mean, that's not necessarily always the case. I mean, that's also something to think about, right? It's something you could discuss amongst yourself. A good VFM examination will probably include at least 3 or 4 different methodologies. And when you look at the reports that I gave you, please look at when you look in there, and when we have a discussion, there's too many people in the group, but we'll have a couple of discussions. So how did they come up to the idea that they decided that, I don't know, that the medicine was procured improperly? How would we go about figuring that out? How did they come to the audit point? A good audit report is based on evidence that is sufficient, relevant, and reliable. How careful was the evidence there? With the purpose. So again, when we look, and we'll pass out after, on the way out the door, you can take these audit reports, we'll split them up. But look at the reports and look at I don't know how you're performing. I didn't look at any of your performance audit reports. But then look at these reports and try to answer these questions, okay? Such conclusions are to be more reliably than based on one source of evidence. And we looked at, when we looked at the forensic auditing seminar, what did we do? We spent a lot of time discussing evidence, right? Different strands of evidence from more than one source, all right? So if I ask Chamika and if I ask you and I ask some of the other people and all, is it going to rain this afternoon? He says yes, you say no, he says yes, but we look out the window and, okay. Quantifying financial impacts. Here are the British serious impact. Improvements in management information that flow from our recommendation may lead the audited body to recover more costs or increase revenue. So, okay, fine. This is what, and we'll look at cost benefit. We'll look at cost benefit, we'll look at benefit cost, so we'll look cost benefit and benefit cost, and cost effectiveness, so we'll look at that later. All right, so we quantify, so fine, it's readable, yes. Qualitative impact here is what it says here, examples includes improved management procedures such as planning. Such impacts may not be quantifiable. So the quality is quantitative, qualitative. Let's look at this thing, logical framework, because if you're really going to get engaged in program auditing or project auditing or whatever you want to call it, this is where it's at. So here, a logical framework, data collection methods, what's the logical model, what's the intervention logic, what's the formulative and substantive. All right, there's 70, this is quite a long thing here, so we'll do this. Anyway, logical model. So every kind of project that you're going to get involved in, any kind of performance audit, logical model, systematic way of systematic and visual presentation, relationship of resources. So any kind of logical model should be able to be broken down into a systematic and visual manner to present and share relationships amongst resources. So even with the seminar, this seminar, for example, or any other seminar, or the quiz or whatever, what's the relationships? What's the resources? What has to happen? And when we talked originally, I said hope to, what does it say? It says hope to achieve, hope to achieve. All right, and the first thing this morning, what did I say? We hope to achieve by doing the quiz, we hope to achieve X and Y anyway. All right, here we talk, and these are terms, indicator, process indicator, metric. I talked about metrics before. Okay, and part of maybe the first thing when you go out to do a program or a project or a performance audit, the first thing you're going to find out is that the people don't have these things. They go, oh, they don't have any metrics, they don't have any indicators, they don't have any process indicators, right? All right, so I mean, this is kind of, if you're just starting to do performance audits, I mean, first maybe you got to get the rule. It's like playing cricket. First you got to write the rule book, and then you get the cricket, right? You get the bat and the stick, right? I love cricket. All right, so here, this was kind of here, down activities, outputs, purpose, goal, assumptions. Okay, here, this is a nice little graph, but in that, go through step by step. So how do I improve the traffic in Sri Lanka, or in Colombo? All right, here, this is a logical framework, goal, purpose, activity, outputs. And we'll look at these individually. Verifiable indicators, means of verifications, and important assumptions. Here's this is a logical framework. And the real thing is if you do a performance audit, you could take this thing out, and if they don't have it, you could fill in the blanks for them, and then you could go out and you could do a performance audit against it. So goal, purpose, objectives, and anything here. Goal, what was earlier this morning, our quiz, the goal of the quiz was 1 and 2. The purpose, what was the purpose? The purpose actually, the goal was to test my ability to teach you and to test your ability to learn. The purpose, why was the purpose? The purpose was to add value to the professionalism of the seminar, that we're here to teach, not to entertain. This is not an entertainment event. Outputs, well, the outputs, you take the test, we look at the test beginning, after, okay. Activities, inputs, the inputs are to take 25 questions, randomly selected. Here it says participatory. I think the interesting thing here is that the intended beneficiaries have a stake in the program design. So again, do we have that if you sit down and you develop this jointly, then everybody has an investment in the process. Define indicators of success and establish criteria for monitoring and evaluation. Defining the indicators for success. Again, how would you ever do a performance audit if you didn't define, what is success? Success is, you have to define what the success is. Success is distributing the exam. Success is completing the exam, success is grading it. Okay, I'll give you another example from practice, and it comes from our friend, Mr. Chamika knows her, this lady, that we're giving it, she gives seminars in Georgia for me. But I don't need to give a test, I don't give a quiz. You know, we spend weeks exchanging troll mail. You know what troll mail is? We exchange emails. Oh, I don't want to give it to, how are we going to define what is success? How do I know the people that attend your seminars learn anything? The mere fact that they're in the room and the mere fact that they're there, they're learning something. But that's not that, you know, the people that are paying the donors, World Bank, you know, they don't necessarily believe that, right? All right, here, if that, this is a core concept in end logic. Here is the important if-then. The if, and by definition, each program has an if-then, means and an end embedded into it. If-then. Okay, example. If I swim 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, then what will happen? Because it does, I already swim 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I don't get slim, right? But okay, here, the better the means and end linkages between each level of aims, the better the program. Go ahead. The better, this one, the better the means and the end linkages between each level and aims, the better the program design. So what they did, the end game is to have a competent person, an assistant auditor. What they do there is they define what skills they need. That's the mean. How do we get the end is to have somebody who's competent as an assistant auditor that could do all the jobs of an assistant auditor or do all the jobs of an assistant accountant. That's the end. The means is how we get there. And if you want, I don't know if I can, but maybe tomorrow we could show you some of the processes that we went through. And one of the processes is to define the key competencies. What do they need to know? And as I said earlier, this plagiarized manual. What they need to have creativity, right? They have to have, what do we say here? They have to have robustness. They have to have some fantasy to solve, especially auditors. They have to have a little bit of imagination, right? So we just finished, last week I was there, we finished a 2-week course. What were some of the subjects? It's interesting, one of the subjects, they brought in a lady from the Human Resources Department. And the lady from the Human Resources Department, what's she teaching accountants for? Doesn't make sense. But the lady from the Human Resources Department was there to discuss how their job evaluations kind of linked into their training expectations, how that actually fit together in the training seminars and how they could go out and do self-directed learning. We had somebody come in to talk to the junior accountants about junior accountants, people that are sitting processing invoices, talking about debt management. What do you say? The guy's a junior accountant sitting somewhere back in the jungle in Zambia, sitting by whatever, I don't know, where the Zambezi River watching the hippopotamuses. All right, so why do they need to know about debt management? So the means in the end, yeah, the end is relatively easy to define, a competent, capable auditor. How do you get there? There's many roads to get from here to Candy, or maybe there isn't, I don't know. How many roads are there to get from here to Candy? One? Yeah, one. Two. Well, that's a bad example. All right, but if you went out in the ocean, there's a lot of ways to get around the ocean. Anyway, so that's kind of the means in the end, but that's also where it comes into why it says logical framework and tying things together. And that's where you might find that if you go out and you say, okay, traffic is a mess in Colombo, what you want to go back and walk that all back and say, why is it a mess? It talks all this stuff, target population, performance indicators, program evaluation, all this other stuff, right? Here, a concise summary of the program, a tool for monitoring progress, and a tool for evaluating the impact. Okay, and the whole deal here too is that, and here's the if-then. Goal, purpose, if-then, the purpose, the goal, if-then, output activities, the goal, the purpose, if-then. A link of if the goal is, the purpose will be then. All right, I mean, if you, hopefully, you know, the goal in talking about this is that that somehow you come to an understanding if we're going to do performance auditing. First you got to get all your alignments, everything has to be correctly aligned to measure the performance goals. If you're really serious about doing performance auditing, then we got to decide what we're going to audit against, right? We have to have an audit. So we'll look here, key considerations for indicator selection. I'll try to put together some things today or tonight more about what goals, impact, and so on, what they are. We'll try to do some more additional material, but let's continue to work through what we have today just to make sure that we finish up. Anyway, here the results chain theory, the if-then we talked about. The question here, this if-then success, accurate, what do we hear? Success, accurate results chain used to design well-executed project ends desired results. Theory failure, inaccurate results chain results in a you could have desired results occurring. The objective of what's up here to show you is that you can get desired results by one or more different pathways. You could have accurate results, inaccurate results chain. You could have well-executed project, poorly executed project. But the only one that works here, it says success, accurate results chain, well-executed project leads to desired results. Okay, the other ones don't. So you have various possibilities here. Inaccurate results chain, but the project's executed well, it doesn't result in desired results. You could have inaccurate results chain, poorly executed project. So as an auditor, at least I have to understand these linkages, okay? Indicate how to recognize success at each level of the aim or the goal. Aim and goal is the same word, aim and goal. So how do we know? The project, at what state, how do they develop? How does a project, if they're going to reduce the issues of traffic congestion inside Colombo, what's going to happen? Number one, number two, number three. Quantitative, qualitative, time-bound. And it says here time-bound. Time-bound means what? You have to say in the first 6 months, in the second 6 months, in the third 6 months, in the first day, in the second day, and the third day. So you might have a trend analysis, you might have statistical records, you might look at the project records. Okay, and it says within 6 months of the project start and every 3 months after throughout the project cycle. All right, here there's the process. They might be methods, trend analysis, rapid focus groups, informant interviews, and surveys. All right, and here's another one that says here that output-based, program-based measurements, trend analysis, transsectional surveys every 1 or 2 years, and then some other short-term, you might do some population-based surveys, you might do some mapping. We'll talk about mapping more tomorrow. And you're doing questionnaires, you're doing log books. Anyway, okay, so let's look today. Now we'll look at here project auditing, and you'll find, so we look value for money, we looked at performance, we'll look at project, and we'll look at this, all right? Differences between success or failure, you'll see very much similarities, and it's good that we can go through this fairly quickly here. Clear responsibilities and accountable. Do they have these objectives? Are the objectives defined? Objectives defined. Experienced people throughout the project. Authority commensurate with responsibilities, good. All right, here, the reasons here, formal inquiry. What is a project audit? It's the same thing as a performance audit here. Revalidate the feasibility of the project, reassure top management, investigate specific problems. And it says here what must have credibility in the eyes of the stakeholders. So that's, all right, so what does that, that means that, and here, highly flexible, may focus on whatever senior management desires. Flexibility means creativity, means setting goals, object efficiency, the logical framework, it all fits together. So who needs project auditing here? It's the project manager, stakeholders' responsibility. Again, same thing here. As performance auditing, as value for money auditing. And it says here, unbiased information. We talked about objective. When we talk about objectives, yes, smart objectives, independently verifiable, didn't we say responsibly generated? All right, the benefits of the project audit are the same as they are for value for money, and they're same as they are for performance, the performance of the team, future opportunities, the project performance. And you might find out that, in fact, here, one of the project, you may say that there's a new harbor going in, or there's a new highway going in. We're going to do a project audit of a new project, building the flyovers or whatever. Here, again, this comes out of Intisaya. It's all it is put in here. But financial audit, management audit, project audit, you could read this yourself. But here, measurement terms. Project audit here, financial terms, scheduled progress established by the contract. So there's a contract. This is where, we looked at procurement audits. This is a standard nomenclature, again, from Intosai, or you could say the Internal Auditors Institute, or the Sri Lankan CPAs. This is standard. That's why we just left it alone. Here, recommendations cover management issues and risk mitigations here. Okay, fine. Project scopes. If we look compared to general or technical audit, it's more of a technical audit, technically qualified persons. External audits, normally a general audit can be done in internal audit department, but here you place reliance on technically qualified people to look at a project. Who's going to evaluate a project building a new port? You have to have engineers. That's what what did I say? I said our friends here in Tanzania, the guy's got 900 or 500 internal auditors, but he doesn't have anybody technically qualified to look at, building railroads or building airports. Okay, but I also said in our position, your position as an internal auditor, we know what we know, but we should know what we don't know. As long as we know what we don't know, then we could find somebody who knows it. All right, here, again, the definition here of the project says, do no harm, be truthful up front, limit contacts to those approved. So when you're, again, a project auditor, and it's much the same, if not the same as a value for money auditor or a performance auditor. All right, maintain objectivity and independence is a case in anything with an auditor does, whether he's financial. Here, it is essential that the project audit consists of key ingredients such as here, ability of the team to exonerate its outside causes, communicate with other project personnel, have access to project records, effective team. Okay. Typical areas here, and here it's a mixed group. When I worked as a performance auditor, I worked with engineers, I worked with people that are involved in human resources. And I happen to mention here, the training, you could look at the training event. I mentioned we were training assistant accountants. Yeah, you could say the training certainly is something like performance auditing. It's auditing, if it's really true training, we test the people, we educate the people, we retest the people. And I said here again, we had someone from personnel department teaching the accountants how to do personal planning. If we were, again, if it was, it's interesting because we attempted to do this with the Supreme Audit Board, or the Auditor General of Sri Lanka, design of a project audit. One of the things here, status of crucial tasks, so you understand, that's important. Format can vary, but the 6 areas have to be covered. What's the limitations? What information do we need? The scope. Project audit initiative. Baseline definition we establish here, determine the standards against. So if we do an evaluation of, say, medical supplies within in Sri Lanka in the districts, how does that work? What kind of standards? There certainly are standards from something like the World Health Organization. And as I think I mentioned earlier, so if you want to get proficient in program or if you want to get efficient in performance auditing, this PMOBK is the program management body of knowledge. As I say, one of the most important things if you want to become a good project auditor or performance auditor is program management, because that's all it basically comes down to. Goals and objectives, timelines, plannings, comparison here, the actuals to the standard. Okay, and that's the same thing performance auditing. We set up SMART objectives, we set goals, we set indicators. All right, and we'll talk here. Project audit should include the following elements. These following elements here: critical examination of the issues, status of the critical activities. What determines? There's critical activities and there's a critical examination. The future status, what's going to happen? These are questions that would go into your audit program. So you should ask, what are the activities, status of activities? Critical examination, what is a critical exam? It doesn't mean, it means to be objective, independent, and realistic. And again, I mean, this goes back to my earlier comment. You could do a performance audit on anything. We could do it on lunch. We could do it on the exam. You could do it on taking the bus from here, wherever. Okay, the important thing here, look, lessons learned from or to other similar projects. That's why we're giving you a dozen different audits to look at. When you get one of these photocopies tonight, look at it, see what's there. What lessons learned? What did we learn? The Canadians here had something about auditing the casualty insurance. What did they learn? What kind of comments and conclusions did they make? All right, and here I put in out of the experience, whatever. I mean, unfortunately, you're always dealing with people, and what do they say? That things, it's really a function of the people that are involved, that projects are not necessarily as successful as they could be. Why don't we go out and start with the last one here, the case studies. It was supposed to be the last one. Why don't we make it the first one, because we could actually, it might be worthwhile discussing it, discussing the background. I think, everybody picked up a case study, at least one yesterday. There's going to be more available during the break, so they'll be out at the table. Again, please take a different one. If you picked one of the Canadian here, if you picked out, say, this one, pick out a different one, okay? The idea is that you take away one, you take away at least two different ones in hard copy, all right? So let's look through I used the word here, reverse engineering. And reverse engineering is not only, it means basically looking at, we have words here, it says reconfigure, it says different things here, it's not sharp, but it says basically take something and understand why it happened, and that's the whole objective in looking at the audit reports. Performance audit reports, I told you, I gave you, there's 3 or 4 of each. This happens to be one. There's here Office of Washington State Auditor, here's a U.S. state, and here's another one. So there's 3, these are the 3 performance audit reports. And if you look here, the one performance audit report, key findings. What does it say? The key findings, developed an innovative contract approach, so forth and so on. The idea here is for you to look at the reports and decide for yourself how did they come up with developing these key findings. The maintenance contract, how did they decide that this was a key finding? It says here, the contract uses many good practices, so forth and so on. Read through it. You could read through these reports yourself. Recommendations. When negotiating the commercial reset, means the new contract negotiations, they should do X, Y, and Z. When finalizing, they should do X, Y, and Z commencing in October. So this is a performance audit. You got three examples. Project audits. I picked out 3 project audits. One happens to be from U.S. Navy base, Marine Corps Air Station, North River Point, North Carolina, controls in a university, and then a third one. Okay, the objective here, it says here project audit, so they understand what the goal was. The goal was to provide money, specific guidelines, so forth and so on. So this was a stimulus package. The president indicated awarding projects, so forth and so on. Look at the structure. You mean, look at the structure. You're going to get a hard copy, your 2 hard copies. I'd recommend if you took one that's a, this happens to be a value for money audit, why don't you look and take the other one, take one that's a project audit or take one that's a performance audit. Okay, here, audit methodology, identified and provided sample projects, verified selected projects, obtained copies of and visited the building, visited and toured the buildings to be repaired, analyzed documentation, okay? So we have an understanding of what the objective is. And we could do a case study. I could give you a case study and say, okay, figure this out. It's much better that you look and see a professional performance audit report, professional project audit report, professional value for money audit report, and you could just utilize that. All right, my friend has this one. Here, I always refer to the Canadians. The Canadians do a really nice job. We looked at the Canadians yesterday a little bit. You know, the whole idea will be tomorrow, we'd like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to stand up and discuss. When we looked at the Canadian ones here, it says managing contracts for professional services. Has it been determined that the internal resources are not available to provide the services? Here, my questions on contract management are, and this is from the Auditor General of Canada to the Parliament. They did a nice structure on the, if you don't get a hard copy of the Canadian one, I would encourage you to look at the soft copy. To what extent do the services received meet the needs? So these are questions that the Auditor General says that the Parliament should pose to whoever, the permanent secretary in charge of infrastructure. Infrastructure projects require expert knowledge, so forth and so on. This is his report, all right? We also looked at the law in Canada, and this is what comes out of the law, okay? You know, what is policy analysis? 7 criteria for good policies and 6 C's of good policies. And then we'll talk maybe about cost benefit. Okay? So public policy will put you to work. So what does it mean? It means here, it comes back to the original goals and objectives. A set of interrelated decisions taken by political actor or group of actors concerning selection of goals. The goals and the means. What did we talk about yesterday when we talked about, so here you see indicate selection of goals and the means. What do we talk, goal? A goal is what? We had one goal, increasing taxpayer compliance, right? You remember that? Or we have a goal, making Sri Lanka great again, right? We're gonna make Sri Lanka great again, that's the goal. The objective would be how do we, you know, the means, how are we gonna make Sri Lanka great again? We're gonna make sure that our internal auditors are receiving training and they're applying, not only receiving training. So we take the quiz, we grade the quiz, we evaluate the quiz, or we look and we see, is anything put into use within a specified situation where those decisions should, in principle, be within the power of the actors to achieve. So again, if we look at it again in the context of this training program or whatever you want to call it, it fits in here within the powers of these actors. Actors is a term, it's interesting, it's used in a political environment or in a World Bank, International Monetary Fund, the US government. They always talk about these actors. An actor just basically means somebody who's engaged in the activity. You know, if you look at the word, the English word, it means to act upon something. It doesn't mean whatever, it doesn't mean Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, it doesn't mean an actor. It means somebody who can cause action. I mean, you always have, it's always kind of a confused, oh, an actor, I'm not an actor. Well, yeah, of course, you cause something to be acted upon. Okay. Regulatory policies, we'll look at different kind of policies here. There's regulatory policies here, and there's redistribution policies. Okay, and what did we find out yesterday about the environmental impact that our quiz had? All right, here, redistribution. This is a good one because this is good here, redistribution. Procedural policies here, environmental protection. This is here, the environmental protection one. Substantive policies. Is that a procedural? Is that an environmental protection? I have no idea. How something is going to be done or who's going to take action. So policy analysis. Yeah, and again, this is, I mean, if you, I don't know how it is in Sri Lanka. I can tell you how it is in the U.S. that there's always people analyzing the policy of the current president, the policy of the past president, the policy of Franklin Roosevelt or George Washington, whatever. So everybody's a policy analyst. So as I say, there's no one generic method. However, fine, there's a number of ways we're going to look. We'll look at the six C's, all right, and we'll look at another one. And the reason behind this is what? The policies actually set the goals, right? If you look at the current, we could look at the current example in the United States. Everybody knows the current example. So Donald Trump says we're going to make America great again. That's his policy, right? He wants to make America great again. Okay, I don't know what did the Prime Minister here? Does the PM, does he promise anything? Make Sri Lanka great again? What is the Sri Lankan? All right, well, okay, it's basically the same thing. If it's a developed country, then it's a great country, right? Okay. So we can look at that's his policy statement. Now he's going to set various goals and then he's going to set various objectives, right? Okay. Policy formulation, policy implementation, and policy. Okay, and the arrows, if you look here, the arrows go what? They go both ways, right? So it's all kind of, and as auditors, doing whatever, a performance audit, you could question any one of these. We can question, okay, whatever, policy formulation. Policy implementation would be what? The policy implementation, as we said yesterday, by 2018, tax rates will drop by X, Y, and Z. You remember that from yesterday, the objectives, right? So we got goals, objectives. All right, so this is, here I'm just a simple accountant. Here I'm doing my own policy analysis. And the impact evaluation, again, what's the evaluation? Is the evaluation an increase in the economy, decrease in the economy? So there are a number of ways. Delivery is the analysis of implementation, evaluation, change, and impact. Impact, change and impact. Yeah, the impact, it's great. So we do all this infrastructure development. We build this big fancy building over here. And that's, again, when you're auditing in the education ministry or what you're looking in the health or whatever. These are questions that you could ask. Anyway, here, stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Okay, so I mean, again, when you go out and maybe start out with your performance audit, you're going to look at the goals, the objectives, whatever. And these are terms that we're interested in. Policy, 7 criteria here, tools of analysis. We'll look at these, the 3 E's of policy option. Benefit, cost, benefit. You could look at number 4 and number 5. See, cost, benefit, and benefit, cost. Remember yesterday I kept mentioning it, is there's a difference, look. And typically, it's interesting, as accountants, number 4, cost, benefit, and this comes down to the whole theory about lowest cost. The accountants, it's the cheapest, you could say, fine, so we build a building here and we import the labor because the labor is going to work for 0 rupees. They'll work for 0 rupees an hour. But you have to look at the other side. This is typically what accountants do. An accountant, or generally any people, they look at here the cost. And the other side, this other benefits cost, and we'll look at that, is typically what an economist. Yeah, what is the benefit and the cost? So what's the benefit? Okay, and again, when you do your performance audits, maybe you ought to go back to we're going back here to the roots of the issue, why a project is not performing. And here, again, these are 7, you could this is established, this is from graduate education class, but here, the side effects, the external output, side effects, the compliance, justice, intervention. So you could sit down when you do your audit, you could say, I mean, does this policy, the education policy or the whatever, the procurement policy for medicine, now then what is the bottom line? Is the policy working with the intended outputs? And again, you could go back and you could look at that. What is the educational strategy? So the focus on whose goal attainment are we involved in? Okay, you could be really developed, but you could be really in debt. Side effects, what are the side effects? Did the negative effects, okay, negative, what are the side effects of the program or policy? You know, would it be better, I mean, if I were going to do a massive building program, but it's very interesting, 20, 30 years ago, when they started doing direct investment from the United States into Europe, I was involved, and the Europeans always had a policy that you had to use local labor. I remember, and it had to have a certain, I remember particularly one investment in Austria where you had to employ the Austrian people. And the same goes around for the other side. If you wanted to invest in China, you would have to show them your technology, you'd have to employ the local people. All right, so again, it comes back here, is it just, if it's good enough for one side, then it's also good enough for the other side? Do the negative side effects outweigh or offset any positive achieved by the policy? Well, you could have negative and you could have positive side effects, okay? Yeah, you could have positive side effects also. I mean, maybe, do the negative side effects outweigh, okay, this is a question here, okay, do the positive side effects, you could flip it around and you say, do the positive side effects outweigh any negative achievement? So then if we could look at the negative achievement, you know, all these buildings are being built not by Sri Lankans, they're being built by external labor, right? So what the positive effect is, so well, you have the building, right? At the end of the positive effect, okay, so at least, you know, we borrowed the money and then we paid them the money back and they took the money back so that's kind of the bad thing, right? Okay, that's the bad thing. The good thing, you got the building, right? At least you got the building. They can't take the building back, correct? So that's an example about like building 300, but if you build, it's interesting, if you build a railroad or if you build a highway, I mean, maybe that's more, you know, said, okay, look, you know, build something that has some kind of utility. It's in Kenya, they're building a railroad right? They're building railroads. They're developing. But again, I hate we keep going on and on about this particular subject. But, I mean, look at it another way. I don't know what else could we have. Who else in the, think about the education development, investment in schools or investment in, or sports. You know, if we invest in sports facilities, you know, the young people, when they get to be older, they're going to be healthier. Well, and again, here, this is good policy, and this is exactly what we talked about in a performance audit. Here is that efficiently, are the people charged with implementing the policy, running it efficiently? Is this the most efficient way of doing business? All right, so the theories and valid. Are the theories and assumptions underlying a given policy valid? Justice, is the policy fair? Does the policy provide justice? It is important. It's the most difficult subjective question in policy analysis. So justice, I mean, what's just, what are the numbers? So and so now you're a professional, you could say that you're a policy analysis expert, right? We did this. The 6 C's: concentration, clarity, challengeability, consistency, coordination. Concentration. Our resources concentrated on the truly decisive aspects of the problem. So, all right, concentration. Our resources truly decisive aspects of the problem. Okay, do the people affected by the policy clearly understand? Well, we had a couple of different real estate speculation and money laundering. I mean, what are aspects of the policy? All right, so the challenge, do the goals challenge the organization yet remain realistic? That's a question. Is it realistic? What's realistic here? Are the people charged with carrying out the policies able to change the way they do business? All right, so this kind of comes into how changeable is the organization affected by the policy? Coordination. Is there effective communication? And is there feedback loops in it? When we talked yesterday, you could look back. I mean, if you remember one thing from yesterday, what our SMART objectives were, what SMART objectives had measurable, relevant, timely. All right, here, consistency is a policy and consistently delivered. That's where I asked you the question, is there island-wide development? And this is kind of an interesting one here, the internal, external, the coordination with policies. I could give you a practical example. Say the Chinese are building railroads in Africa to take products out, also to bring products in, but they're developing the Africans are developing domestic manufacturing, domestic production. So, I mean, consistency coming down here, all the development that's going on, what's happening? Are there guys like these here that are trained to work on presentations? All right, the E's here go back to equity, efficiency, effectiveness, and not economy, but equity, okay? Go back and look, the policy of making Sri Lanka great again by building the harbor city. Is it equitable? Okay, here, cost benefit. Again, whatever, I imagine everybody here is an accountant of some sort or another. Cost benefit. Here, the assessment is made concerning whether realized benefits justify the cost. It is best to think of cost as a way of organizing thought rather than substituting for it. So the cost and the benefit, all right, cost benefit. And we'll look the other way because this is the way that the accountants look at it, and we'll look at the way that here is implicit, explicit assessment of the benefits associated with a particular choice. And there's a technique, as I said, I mentioned also yesterday here, benefits and costs. They could be monetary or non-monetary, And the non-monetary part comes more. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes here. But I mean, that's the important thing here. What's the non-monetary? Anyway, okay, here, benefit cost. It is an attempt to identify and express in monetary terms all the effects of the proposed programs, projects, okay? It says here the benefits, the challenge is to quantify the benefits. This is a simple occasion. If the benefits exceed the costs, then it's a positive. It doesn't, it's a negative. So here, the challenge is to quantify, to put a value. Cost benefit justified, barely justified, not justified. Okay, the goal is not to maximize the ratio. So here, the goal is to determine if benefits exceed the cost. They talk about the benefit of having cell phones, right? Having cell phones. What does it mean? So now everybody's got a smartphone, but what does that mean? Everybody has access to the internet. In the United States, what does it mean? It means the attention span, nobody has an attention span anymore. Not only mobile phones, but the fact that everybody, the children, even, I don't know how it is here, but you see the tourists walking around looking at their phones all the time, right? So that's the access to information, does that outweigh the ability to think, right? So cost effectiveness here is effectiveness. Some policies are extremely effectiveness, how their effectiveness justify their costs. All right, and here, that particularly comes into things like it may be worthwhile. Cost effectiveness analysis, the cost of dollars of a life saved, the least cost of electricity. They always use an example of, saving one life. They always use an example here. It's interesting, the U.S. In their military, what is the cost of one soldier? The life of one soldier. The cost, I can personally tell you, the cost to keep, when we were in Iraq, it was $1 million every year for one soldier that had a gun that was pointed at whoever it was to be pointed at. And for every one soldier that was pointing a gun, there was 213 people behind him making sure that he had shoelaces, that he had his Coca-Cola. All right, so you could even look at, I mean, here, the cost effectiveness, you have whatever, the motorway going to the airport or wherever, where are they building motorways else to? Are they building motorways somewhere else? All right, so the things like that, that cost, so here, cost effectiveness. And you could question that too in the electricity to the community or water to the community or things like that. The objective cost of the outcome versus the technology, the concept excludes most externalities on the benefit side, so it's more focused. All right, anyway, here, fine. Why don't we look at the first? Continuous process, outcome, continuous improvement, productivity measures, steps in business process analysis, and definition of productivity. Here, this is what we're going to. Here's a good definition of something that's not really productive, right? And it's a continuous process to get it to work. Every time it's the same thing. Output versus input, we all know here, definition of productivity. Output versus input. All right, it's here, I mean the input, yeah, how productive is our little educational process? I mean, hopefully our little seminar, so the input is all the information that we put on the deal. The output, what's the impact on the productivity of the internal auditors? There's an example, direct example. You know, hopefully we learned a little bit about policy analysis this morning. Yesterday we learned a little bit about, what did we learn about yesterday? Goals and indicators. Okay, so we're, whatever we're doing here, we're putting in energy, we're putting in information, we're giving you some tools, and hopefully whatever the customers, the output, the services that you provide as internal auditors, you're going to transform this productivity. Okay, and we all, I'm sure everybody in the room understands this. The interesting thing is how to take this and use it to translate into an audit situation and explain, you say the performance is good or you say the performance is not good. How can we convert this into an explanation, audit point, or into some kind of audit? How would I test this as an auditor? Again, how do I check productivity? So up here, productivity improvements. The output increases and the input decreases. Output increases if the input stays the same. Increase in output, increase in input. So these are various formulas. Output can go down, input can go down. So, the physical, whatever, we reduce the volume, but we have the same impact, right? You could look at this in many different kinds of audits, in any kind of transaction. You could look at this in different ways, and we'll look at it. You'd say we could go back to our quiz, please, our quiz. Talk about the quiz. Well, yeah, the quiz that we're giving is multiple choice, true and false, and multiple choice. And if you go back to the original introduction slides, you're going to see you'll look at the introduction sheet. It'll say the reason we selected multiple choice was to be more efficient. The objective is to test now. Okay, here's some productivity, dynamic and static. And again, the reason we put this here is it's just so you have some idea. If it was another person that gave the seminar, maybe they'd give you a question and you have to figure out this stuff. I think it's more important, it has more value if you're acquainted with the idea rather than doing this mathematical. P, output over input, doesn't matter. So, multiple products, price cost changes, there could be a change in the price, a change in the redesign. In our little quiz, we redesign the product and improve the quality, improve the productivity. I mentioned they happen to say quality, but yeah, quality kind of is a hard to measure factor. There's a hard to measure factor. Yeah, the quality of, again, our little exam or this, and in the same thing too with different, any kind of activities, whether it's processing accounts payable or doing any kind of transactions in accounting, how do you measure the quality of putting a budget together, completing a budget, starting a project, completing a project? There's different productivity measures. Okay, I wanted to mention here that there's some productivity. He talked about here Sri Lanka is supposed to be what, a developed country? Okay, they come up with the OECD and the global gross domestic product is a measure of the best, labor productivity. And one of it here, the quality of the work life, right? Quality of the work life, quality of life issues, quality of work life. Efficiency, resources input, measures resources expected and focuses to what degree does the system utilize the right things? To what degree did the system utilize right things? Okay, so if we go back maybe to our example of the what Harbor City or whatever. I mean, the borrowing, the foreign debt engaged to put together money to build the expressway from the airport to the city. Yeah, to what degree did the system utilize the right things? Measures the plan versus actual effectiveness. And here the plan, yesterday we talked a lot about the development of the indicators, development of the goals, the development of the objectives. Measures what the system sets out to accomplish, the objectives with what was actually accomplished. Okay, and if the objective, we'll go back to our working example, our objective in Georgia, they said that the mayors are responsible for managing their own budgets, correct? Local government. So that's the one policy. The other policy, the Minister of Finance says we're going to put in IFMIS or GIFMIS or whatever you want to call it, financial management system, right? And when we look at work, we're going to look, we'll move more into actually practical things, and we'll see what blockages are, what stoppages are. We'll look at it from a manufacturing standpoint, but you could also say every process is, whether holding this seminar was a manufacturing process. Okay, and quality, the focus here, it says, yeah, performance, convenience, responsiveness, perceived quality. I mean, when we look at a process and analyze it for quality, what are the quality is it convenient? Does it conform? Is it responsive? So forth and so on. All right, quality of life, and as I say here, the the measure that the system, the quality of life, when we're looking at a process, is there quality, the measures the way that employees in the system respond to the social, technical aspects of that system. So the quality of life, again, we look at the idea of performance auditing. When you look at the performance audit reports, I think one of the audit reports that you has to do with delivering medicine into to the population. How does that improve, or how would the quality of life improve by, yes, we have foreign direct investment, we allow all these things into the country. Is there a development plan? How is it improving the quality of an average Sri Lankan's life? Slides, it's policy analysis, it's work analysis, that's it, work analysis. I mean, we were originally going to talk more about process analysis, but maybe it's better we could do that either tomorrow, just to refresh what we learned today, or we don't have to do it at all. I think we get a little bit more benefit looking at this. So why don't we I told you here, time and motion studies. I don't know if anybody knew about or knows about time and motion studies, macro motion studies, breaking jobs into elements here, problem solving processes. Yeah, time and motion studies, we'll see here, it's time and motion studies goes back way, it's probably 150 years old. It's kind of interesting, this time and motion studies actually started in the manufacturing, it was started actually in Chicago where they manufactured telephones. This macro motion is a more advanced, and then breaking jobs into elements. So it's similar to this business process mapping, but it's more and more detailed. Okay. Problem solving. Define the problem, analyze the problem, search for possible solutions, search for alternatives. It's a basic process. Recording fact, no evaluation. So, I mean, you could look at the process of our seminar. Any activity, it's very, very straightforward. What happens when? Whether whether the process is good or bad doesn't really make a difference. So there's no no evaluation. Statement of the purpose. The goal is to provide a seminar, analysis of the problem. The problem is to have the right people in the right place at the correct time and adequately prepared, okay? Communicate the details for action and the preferred method to all concerned. So this is problem. And when you start to analyze any activity, whether it's development of a test, development of a financial statement, whatever, it's putting one box on top of another on top of another. All right, work study, systematic examination to improve to a set of standards, okay, a set of standards. The important words, systematic, improve to a set of standards. And the standards, there's actually, you could find standards on all sorts of activities. You could find standards, in fact, educational standards. There's certain educational standards. USAID itself has a standard. What should a seminar to have? It should have a test at the beginning. It should have a test at the end. It should have activities. It should have case studies, so forth and so on. So you could systematically assess our seminar in relation to other seminars, okay? Classroom training, adult education. I mean, if you really wanted to, we could put up, I have actually upstairs on my computer, the various steps laid out. Productivity enhancement. The idea here is to enhance productivity. All right, and at the end of the day, again, with any kind of process, including our little seminar here, is your productivity going to be enhanced? Are you going to be able to do anything more effective use of resources? Ideally, the Sri Lankan government has engaged, you're employed as auditors. Is there any productivity enhancement? Productivity, we talked about this morning. Productivity, output over input. Production is the number of products different from is number of products. So yeah, the production, hopefully the production of whatever, forensic audit activity, procurement audit activity, in our case now, performance audit activity, hopefully there's more products come out, either as standalone audits or as audit points or as audit notes, okay? So that you're more from a given input, right? The given input, there's the same amount of auditors. Is there going to be any bigger impact? So we looked at, hopefully now you understand policy, you understand setting indicators. Hopefully you understand what a number of things. So here's a quote. This is, where is he? He's probably taking his nap, right? He's probably taking his nap, right? We don't want to wake him. He's probably taking, it's nap time, right? So this is okay. So obviously we don't have a qualified employee here. But here, anticipated difficulty, carries out tasks without much conscious attention, seems relaxed, acquires a rhythm, so forth and so on, right? So that's what you have to look at. And this whole work studies is a whole. Yeah, it used to. I don't know how it is nowadays, but 30, 40 years ago when I first started to work, it was a big deal, and I'm sure it's a big deal somewhere, someplace today. I don't know how big of a deal or how big of a project it is, but it was all any kind of production facility in the United States, it was always work time and motion studies. Smooth, consistent movements, acquires rhythm. There's certain people that could work as whatever it is, a chief accountant or as a person dealing in the hospital, that it's not always a panic. That they actually move through things, smoothly move through things. One who has acquired the skills, knowledge, and other attributes to carry out work by meeting the standards of quality, quantity, and safety. Okay, that things are actually predictable. That or whoever knows. You're the basic customer of this information. If you come to the next seminar, you should expect about the same thing that you came to this seminar, okay? Work content, it means the amount of work contained in a given job, measured in man hours, machine hours. And as I say, we'll look, I think it's in the other set of slides, but here, it's funny, you could say machine hour, everything is a machine. The production here, you could say everything is kind of a mechanical activity. Producing lunch is a mechanical activity. You may not say it's a mechanical activity. Closing the financial statements or producing reports on activity, health activity, how many people are sick, how many people are not sick, what kind of medicine is there, what kind of medicine is not there, how does a policy go through Parliament. It basically comes down to mechanical steps. Nothing just gets created out of thin air. And that's why it's always kind of good to have a concept of machine hour. Yeah, I could say, I'll give you an example. Yeah, I think I told you I'm running a project. I have a person, it's going to take me 3 hours to do one slide. He says, I want 3 hours. It's not humanly possible to take 3 hours. He says, he turns in his worksheet. I worked 17 hours, or 17 days. So I said, okay, well, what did you actually accomplish in 17 days? Well, I accomplished nothing. All right, so it all comes down to man hours, person hours. One person, 1 hour. Okay, so to do one question in the quiz, we allow 90 seconds. Okay, what does that mean? That means you got a minute to read it and 30 seconds to decide yes or no. So that's how you could evaluate. If you talk about processing, reading a financial statement, whatever, it all comes down into time. There's time. Basic work, the minimum amount of time to produce 1 minute. Again, the quiz, it takes maybe 1 minute to read the question. Admittedly, in our case, the fact that it's not it's in English, it's not in. So yeah, basic work and then real excessive work. Yeah, again, so basic work and excessive work. Again, when you analyze something from a performance. Basic work, the minimum amount, again, with the little quiz, you get a minute to read it and half a minute to answer the question. So basic work content, excessive work. Yeah, excessive work is wasted time. It's wasted time. How much time is actually wasted? That's where you get the performance improvement in the job. So a job could be broken down. All right. Here are if we use a test, for example, maybe the excessive work content is you translating it from English into Singal, so that's excessive work, and that's something we should eliminate. I would advocate that the test should be in always should be in local language. It's embarrassing. Why should I give you a test in English, right? Or why should we be teaching? We should teach in a language that everybody understands. Method study. And comes back to the business process analysis here. Systematic recording and critical, but here we have critical examinations of the way of doing things. Okay, the critical examination. When you do a time and motion study or when you do any kind of these work studies, this is where is it necessary to do what is being done, all right? Is it necessary to translate this or not translate it? The method study. Develop more economical methods of doing it. In our particular case, the material, why isn't it translated? Well, I don't know, because there's either time not available to translate it, or there's money not available to translate it, or a mix of the both. I don't know. Work measurement, the application of techniques designed to establish a time for a qualified worker to carry out a task at a defined rate of work. Determines how long it would carry out the work. Again, our quiz, if you look at the time plan, we had 30 minutes or 40 minutes, a minute and a half a question. If you also look, and some of these Some of these modules, the modules have different times allocated to them. We allow 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes per slide on average, and that's how we determine how much time there is. Somebody says they want a seminar to last 2.5 days or 3 days, then we back calculate. And again, the standard I use is about 2 minutes a slide, because you got beginning slides, you got some slides with information, some slides with not. When you analyze a process, you could do the same thing. If you're allocating work, if there's invoices going through a tax department, or in our case, the goal was what? The goal was to reduce or increase the number of people paying taxes, compliance. Well, you might want to also see what kind of time, the employees work 35 hours a week. How long does it take to do a case? Maybe it takes, you could say that, it takes 35 hours. It takes 1 hour, so they should be able to collect 35 tax cases a week. Or you could say it takes 2 hours, so that's 17 and a half, or 17. So there's various methods. And again, in performance auditing, that is what you do. You measure work, right? We got objectives. Yesterday we talked about all these objectives. And yesterday we talked about goals. And now we're talking about detailed things. Okay? Basic procedures. Select, record, examine, develop, evaluate, define, install, maintain. So there's some material in here about standards. We'll talk about a standard. It's not a standard. It's always funny. There's a international accounting standard, all these other standards. But there's a standard. There's a standard. Maybe 6 hours a day is a standard for training, or 5 hours. So that's a standard. Maybe, as I say, my standard is for each individual slide. Each individual slide, I have a standard. So when I sit down and I develop material, I decide what subjects, I decide what areas. Whenever you're it's like putting together a menu for lunch. You got a menu for lunch. You got an appetizer, you got dessert, you got coffee, all the other things. So here, select, record, examine, develop, evaluate, define. Results of different alternatives. Here, results of different alternative solutions. So instead of holding our seminar from 8 o'clock or from 9 o'clock, maybe we start at 8 o'clock and finish at 2 o'clock. All right, so time and motion studies. I tell you, Frederick Taylor, and this goes back to you could look in you could put this in Google and see. It goes back to 1897. It's 100 and something years old. You'll find out that this was Frederick Taylor, and you'll find out that this was at a factory, Western Electric in Chicago. The building still was there last time I was there. So time study is one element, is scientific management, beyond all others, making possible of transferring skills from management to men. And what he meant here was, it was getting people to do things. That's what it means, getting people from management to, okay. A method used to increase productivity by many companies around the world today. And companies, not only companies, but also governments. It's, okay, motion study here, and the picture here, this is supposed to be a person, and it's the range of, what are their activities? What are they doing? Normal working area, outside working area. This was originally put into process to complete repetitive jobs. And most jobs are repetitive, unless you're an artist. I mean, every activity has a certain amount of rhythm, whether it's closing the accounting books, producing financial statements, producing records about health. Everything's repetitive. Helps determine how much, And again, I gave you my example about my one individual. I said, okay, look, I want you to produce a training seminar. I want you to make it so many hours long. And he says, well, it's going to take me 3 hours to do one particular slide. I said, okay, fine. So that means, what are you going to do? That in 1 week, you're going to do 11 slides or 11 things. How's that going to work? It's just not rational. I mean, it's not logic. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really. You could look at the value or we're not talking. We're talking what kind of activity. How do I make a work schedule? If you go into an organization and you say, okay, we could process so many driver's licenses or so many permits, how long does it take? You could put a simple number, a simple pencil, and a simple piece of paper and figure it out. How much is produced by workers in a specific period of time, therefore making it easier to predict schedules and outputs. Benefits that having worked as an audit, how long does it take to audit the Ministry of Interior? How long does it take to do these things? That's where we have an advantage, okay? The time study is where the standards, and I told you my standard is 2 minutes a slide or so, and the motion study, whatever, in our particular case, there's really not that. Motion study, how much you move to do a job, how much you get done in a period of time, okay? And I also have a metric. 1 day to do one seminar day takes between 3 and 4 working days, okay? So if we do a 3-day seminar, that means it takes 12 days to prepare the material, which we didn't. This seminar was produced in 5 days, but this is how it works. If it takes so many days to do an activity, so that's the time and the motion. Time, look at the average time it took an average worker. Okay, so fine, I could use, when I sit down and look at the people that do things for me, I know how long it takes myself, and you could add a little. You could say, well, fine, if I did this, it'd take me an hour. Okay, let's make it 2 hours for you or 3 hours for you. Great, but it all comes down, if they say that it's going to take them 9 hours or 10 hours, it's not rational or reasonable. Estimate, performance record, stopwatch, standard. One of the things actually I didn't, I don't know if you noticed that in the last seminars, I kept a little clock. I didn't bring it down. I usually keep a little clock here. And I watch. I mean, it's interesting wherever I work. I mean, I watch the time all over, and I actually try to make a time budget. You don't necessarily stopwatch. Stopwatch is kind of strange. But just keep rough records of how long, I don't know how big time management is, but it was very interesting in the 80s and 90s when there was transitioning economies. One of the biggest seminars that was offered was time management, people being able to manage their time, right? And maybe that's, in addition to having a seminar about ISO, maybe the government needs to know how to manage your time. It's surprising how many people can't manage their time. You have a to-do list. Where are you at? Where do you want to be? Cycle time, the period of time required to complete one cycle from beginning to end. As I told you, 3-day seminar, based on my personal experience, depending on the subject, to do one day takes between 3 and 4 days of background effort to do. It depends on what the subject is, but it takes 3 to go through the cycle. To do whatever other activities, you can measure performance against, working in a hospital. How long does it take to process a patient? How long does it take to complete a traffic ticket? How long does it take to to do whatever. Why don't we, when we look, we could finish up here, and maybe we should talk about the audit reports. We could talk about the audit report. We'll take one audit report out or two, and we could talk about them today, and then we could finish up. How do you decide? Well, yeah, here are the production costs too high. So is the budget too high? Is it the fact that there's, are we running a budget deficit? Is it too expensive to have activities? How can it be solved? What alternative? Why is there a problem? Okay, and that, I mean, we could all agree on, why is it? It's interesting. You go in the airport in India, and there's like 3 people doing everything. There's one guy doing something, there's another guy watching him, and there's a third guy watching both of them. It's amazing. It's amazing. Our production cost, but production costs too high. How could it be solved? Which alternatives are better? Time study, motion analysis, and as I say, the basic purpose is to improve the work and reduce waste. Human effort in workstations, and workstations here, workstations too. I mean, oftentimes you find office reorganization. I keep going back to my old idea about flow charting, and also I keep saying Visio. Hopefully, go out and get yourself a copy. But it's interesting to look how papers move through an office. I happened to one time I was involved in doing a review of how budget execution, how were payments being made by the Treasury Department. And you find out that the application starts at one place, it goes over here, it goes back and forward and backward. There's no continuous flow of motion. And pages get lost, documents get lost. So here, motion studies use the principles to develop economic workstations. How are things laid out? I mean, we all maybe know from working ourselves, how do we keep our working space arranged? Time standard, and you compute it an average 80. I always use 85% because it allows for an effectivity. I think when we did the example here, I told you if it takes an hour, maybe you say it takes 2 hours or 3 hours, but there's a standard to increase. Set a standard, but only set it at about 85%. All right, 60% is typical. Anyway, here, motion study, and again, to answer your, it starts somewhere. You have to start somewhere. If you don't start, it's like, if I don't start, I don't finish, right? If I don't get upstairs, if I don't go in the swimming pool, I don't get to the other end of this. I have to go down, jump in the water, and exercise, right? All right, which doesn't have any effect. Here, please. Flow patterns and all this other workstation design. And this is where and again, we'll go after to make it easy on everyone, including Mr. Chimika. We will discuss a couple of the audit reports, but you can figure out, like, what did they do? We had one of the audit reports where they said the Canadians looked at, what was it? I know there was something in there about the insurance, casualty insurance, but we could look at a couple of those and try to relate it to these ideas. Operation charts, multiple activity charts, pattern flows, all right? Motion study is design, time study is measure. Motion study, where does a particular document go? How does it go around? Another example, practical example I could give you relates to processing payments by the Treasury Department. I happened to look at a particular country I was in. There were 16 signatures on a payment execution. I don't know what you call it, a bill of execution or a warrant. I don't know what they call it in British. But 16 signatures, and they still had payments going wrong. All right, so that was an operations analysis kind of. Motion study is the creative activity, creative part. And again here, produce to eliminate time. How long does it take a particular activity to occur? Macro motion here divided into, it says any process can be studied by, and it's interesting they talk about this artificial intelligence, AI or whatever it is, whatever self-drive, any process, it's just a matter of how much effort. And we'll look in some detail, look at the detail here. Operations, transportations, inspections, delays, and storage. All right, here in our little case here, translation, delays, wait for the start of what do we have? We have all observed activities are recorded. Activities that are not, activities that are not done are also recorded, right? When the process is first studied, each activity is recorded and arranged into one of the 5. Here's the 5 classes. We could say here, can the activity be eliminated? If not, all right, can the and we talked about earlier in a case of translation, would it be better? It would be better if the materials were translated. It would be better maybe if you had somebody that spoke Sinhalese. Process chart, flow charts, a route, and there, I have some examples in here, but we'll see detailed. And yeah, again, they're manufacturing type examples because those are the easiest ones. But here you could see a route sheet, process flow. We all have. There's some examples in here. Break the job into elements. It says here to be more accurate, different types of elements must be classified. So what and again, when I told you when we did the accounting, the financial statements, we decided what had to be done first. The bills had to be paid, the invoices had to be written, the journal entries had to be made, and we were able to reduce the time and separate effective time and ineffective time. All right, foreign elements, governing elements, manual elements. All right, elements. The elements that occur. Your variable elements is maybe the amount of time that you need to sleep. Right? So constant elements is that you constantly don't pay attention, okay? So again, these are fact. It's all kind of funny, it's all kind of amusing, and it's all kind of, but it all has a realistic, I mean, there's, you could apply it. It's not governing, and going back to the thing about a case, element which occupies the majority of time in the cycle. So if we at least write down the cycle, and you could write down, what kind of case would it be? A case of a hospital going in. So what do when you go to the hospital? Maybe they take your blood pressure, they take your temperature. So here again, I took this out of something that we did, but here, process flow. Again, how do things move around? Somebody says, I want you to improve, and again, I had a case where I was supposed to look at how allotments and commitments were made. And the first thing I did is see how the documents went around the department and who looked at them. All right, here, process chart. The steps, the various steps, and these are various steps of an operation. Cool, fold, cut, assemble. The next one here is an operation process chart, and you can see that there's a lot more activity involved, a lot more detail, and it says what happens. It says move to. It says fold, it says inspect. All right, here, move from point A to point B, move. This is a operations flow. It has here the details of the process. And you should be able to do the steps of the form. What happens? This is 16 steps. This happens to be a manufacturing process, but it could also be, here it says binding paper. But given enough time, given enough creativity, you should be able to do this for any activity. The route sheet is, and again, you find this has got barcodes on it, but you find this oftentimes now in how do they process paperwork. Paperwork has a routing. What happens first, what happens second, what happens third. I don't know if it's in Sri Lanka, but in some places I've been, they do e-government with electronic document management. Well, you find that in a number of places, electronic document management, a paperless, how things go through the system. But here, the barcoding, how does a case get processed? All right, here, micro motion. Okay, micro, and our friend here he's looking through a microscope. So this is micro activity here, is gained from reducing cycle time. This time cannot be found in macro studies because it's usually within one so it's a singular process, okay, considerable time. Micro motion here, it's aesthetic to divide. And this gets, I don't think anybody in our area would get involved in this level of detail, but I put it up here so that we're informed. Time standard here, a time standard I told you when we computed, my time standard is 30 seconds to grade one exam, 100 exams, 50 minutes or 60 minutes. This is a time standard. All right, well-qualified, normal pace doing a specific task. Okay, so the task has got to be defined. And in normal times, what you find, you do performance audit and you find out there's no standards established. There's no desk procedures. There's no, or the procedures are not up to date. As I told you here, the number 2, the performance rate, the pace is 90%, 110% to 100% is normal, personnel fatigue. So we could look at, in the case of whatever, grading interruption related to work, non-related to work, how much effort is it chasing around people trying to get them to do their work, right? This increases the time, right? All right, job analysis. Job analysis is the process of studying jobs to gather, analyze about responsibilities which is required to perform the work, please. Okay, so it's actually, and it could be done for an existing job, or it could be done for a planned job, a future job. All right, and as I say, I mentioned yesterday we talked about this Frederick Taylor guy, and we talked about what he did, please. And I mentioned here this Hawthorne, it was called it's famous Hawthorne Studies, 1927, 1932. And it happens, as I say, the Hawthorne Works was in Chicago. It's in Chicago, my home city. It's pretty much in the center of the city. They used to manufacture telephones. You remember the old telephones that you'd pick up and answer, right? It was a company called Western Electric, in fact, so it was very famous. And this is where this guy, Mayo, so he said here, the workplace is a social system. They were psychologists, social psychologists. So as we'll see when we move on, but it says here, work is more than just duties and tasks. Work is more. They were trying, the whole objective was to get employee involvement. This came out of the whole period in the United States when the unions, and they wanted to improve conditions for laborers and so forth and so on. So again, here 1932, here, work group norms affect productivity. Okay, the outcomes of job analysis. And here, job specification. Remember, procurement, we spent a long time pointing and saying procurement. So what do we want? What do we want done here? And here, the idea assures that the employees and manager are on the same page. Who does what? Okay, here, this is what job requirements matrix. The job requirements, so specific tasks, dimensions, importance, nature. So like what we did, as I say, what we did in Tanzania was we went through and we look, what does a junior auditor do? What does an audit manager do? What does a senior audit manager do? And we said what the specific tasks are, what is the dimension, what is the importance, how much time, what is the nature? All right, and I could share that at some point in time. Anyway, you could actually look at that and see how it works out. Job description and job specification are two different things. A job description, okay, you just look roughly here. There's 7 items here. There's 10 items there. Specification is a bit bigger, and it expands skills required, abilities required, education required, experience required. This is the area where it expands in. Performance standards, how much, how fast, how accurately, how on, so forth and so on. So here, the purpose of the manual, guidance and assistance to enable auditors to conduct audits of the highest level of quality and professionalism. And I've given you, again, in the shared drive, which we'll make sure that you open, you have all these ISSAs. There's a international, the Supreme Audit Standards. There are international standards, the Supreme Audit, ISSA, guidelines, all this other stuff. Independent review, economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And and we could actually get some benefit out of this here. When we looked at policy assessment, we also looked at the equity instead of efficiency. We looked at equity of Again, here's the international standard 300. It's exactly how he laid out the manual, because exactly the manual is the standard, right? Okay. Okay, and the standards are also, they're available for free on the Intosaya website. Risk should actively manage risk. We all know that. Communications, he spends considerable time talking about communications. The manual says we should have necessary competency, professional judgment, quality control, exercise skepticism, materiality here. He also talks about materiality. He talks about documentation. Here he gives you a little flow chart. All right, we worked through each one of these. Objective inputs, we talked about objectives. We talked about economy. We talked about outputs. Okay, in the manual, you got a little picture to look at. There you go. Here's a objective indicator. By the end of 6 months, 12%, 12,000 children. These are specific indicators. So, but we actually, I mean, what we did when we invested your time is we learned how to do this. Okay, he apparently also said here that Article 154 of the Constitution, Amendment 19, and then the new audit, performance auditing in Sri Lanka, the Auditor General mandate. Again, the manual was done for the Auditor General's Department. Yeah, maybe what's more important here is how effective is your, it would have been worthwhile, and certainly if I'd had more time, we could have talked about how the Public Accounts Committee utilizes the performance audit to fulfill their mandate. He talks about strategic plan. There was a PIFA point. There's a performance indicator that talked about how the audit programs affect the public financial management, right? All right, so here, strategic plan. So he tells you what a strategic plan is. All right, what to include in the plan, what areas to watch, what areas to survey. And when I reviewed this stuff, I said, okay, fine, what's really here? Goals, idea, plan, implementation, success. So the idea here, whatever, when you set a in the strategic plan, how could we relate that to what we talked about this morning? You could take the PIFA, or you could take the TADT, and you could set up your own performance auditing strategic plan for your ministry, for the Ministry of Defense, or for the Ministry of Health, or Ministry of Education. Yeah, he said and put in the manual here some criteria that he received: materiality, who's responsible, what topics have an effect, what will lead to. Great. All right, here, criteria, auditability, can the topic be audited? This was one of the criteria we looked at, yesterday or the day before. And again, this morning we looked at the PIFA and we looked at the tax. You understand here about the Treasury single account, about the VPP. All right, previous audit report, again, this was part of the manual that you have. Here we talked, instead of here, does the policy, is it sensitive? We talked about analyzing policy, right? Analyzing, rather than saying here, we talked about policy analysis. All right, here he goes through the strategic planning process again. So great, the next slide that he has here, the next thing that he says is, so ISO 3, international standard for the international auditing, supreme auditing standards state that ensure that the audit of high quality. That's great. We demonstrated how you could actually do that. All right, here, so he talked here, and planning involves 2 steps, a pre-study and the audit plan. That's great, we all know that. The plan is planning a 3 steps to an audit plan: define what you're gonna do, define the scope, and define the quality. Yesterday we looked at this New South Wales audit report. We could actually use what we have here maybe today. We'll see that that they did steps like this, and they put it into the report. They define the scopes, they determine the quality measures. What are the audit objectives? Okay, here, and he kindly put in here from a couple of audit objectives. So here, determine whether the fisheries of Canada environment can demonstrate they're adequately administered and enforced. Good. All right, here, and then here, National Audit Office of England. Objective was to review the progress made in implementing reforms of benefits. All right, here, planning the who, what, where, when, why, and how. We've been saying this for the last sessions. We've always been with forensic, with procurement. So he said planning the performance, define the scope, answer the questions who, what, when, where, and how. Here, examples of scope of work. Here, the national audit, here again, he's got the same things that he put up so we could see these are already here. Who, what, where, when, and how. Here's a good example. He said, our inventory is appropriately managed. This is really isn't performance auditing. This is an example. Our inventory is appropriately managed. Here was a decision table that he had put in the manual. Define the scope, design, audit criteria, define what is to be undertaken, so forth and so on. Talks about often audit entities do not have readily available criteria for measuring targets, right? This is part of your audit manual that you have, audit to design matrix. There you go. This is certainly a useful tool. And then here, then he also says here, quality assurance procedures. This is another massive effort of work here. Performance audit, collect, review, file case studies, great. Conduct a performance interview by doing this. This is, all right, here, the types of evidence, great. It's in the audit manual. For the people that were in the forensic auditing course, I mean, I think we walked away with good ways to gather evidence, no? Table, useful to learn how to do performance auditing. All right, here, report, input, output process. In the report here, so it gives you an idea what the table of contents, executive summary, so forth and so on. No examples of what a report is. All right, he talks about smart recommendations. We talked about smart objectives. Here he gave you one example. All right, here. And here there's a smart recommendation, non-smart recommendation. So here he shows you, it's here. Okay, fine. Who's got a case study? Who wants to talk about their case study? All right, talk about your case study.
This is actually the audit report for value for money. This is in the country is Rwanda, the institution agriculture development agency. That's called RADA. So from this report, I have noticed many things. It is given in the report. So one is executive summary, and introduction, audit design, and the description of implementation and detailed findings, conclusion, and recommendation. Here, under this executive summary that is given by the Deputy Auditor General, so he has given the summary from the findings and the whole report. He has done he has used the document and observation and interviews. From there, he has mentioned the lack of documentation because he found that documentation is lacking and missing fertilizer in storage, because this is the agriculture department. They have actually focused in two areas. One is fertilizer distribution and the recovery of loan. They have given the loan to the farmers, and whether the recovery has done its proper way. That's the two areas have been audited. So then lack of documentation is the one issue, and missing fertilizer in storage is another issue, and overestimation of fertilizer in the districts. They have bought more than the requirement. So therefore, most of the many fertilizer is in the storage. That means it was not distributed in a proper manner. Low rate of recovery of loan. So the second area is recovery of loan. That is also mentioned. The recovery is not a proper way. They have not properly recovered the loan from the farmers. And inappropriate seeds distribution to the farmers. The farmers' seeds distribution also not properly done. So they have mentioned here the value for money, then reason is also given why they have done the value for money auditing. 49% of the amount fertilizer is wasted.
Yeah, it's okay. That's good. In fact, it's interesting when I remember looking at this one, and there was something about the subsidies, the seeds. There was a subsidy. They were getting them cheaper. And they were selling them from one country to another country. So it's a policy. We looked. The policy was to give cheap fertilizer and seeds. Was it both fertilizer or just the seeds? But they were giving cheap seeds, and the farmers were taking them from here, and they were selling them across the border. So I can't remember, did they mention that in the audit report, that it was a finding that the policy should have been adjusted? Was that one of the recommendations? I can't. Yeah, they questioned the policy, right? Okay, so I mean, they went in, they saw that there was misappropriate, and it kind of grew out into something. They took a different direction, right? The fact that there was wastage, but why did the wastage occur? Bad government policy.
The goal of this project is, main goal, crop intensification program is to increase agriculture productivity, high potential food crop, and ensure food security and self-sufficiency. That is the goal. And there is a limitation, that is a lack of documentation is the one limitation there. And next I am going to see the objectives. And again, the objectives are according to the performance audit standards. They have given specifically set out the objectives. The team focus on the following audit objective: management of agriculture inputs, stakeholder sensitization, coordination of CIP. Those are the 3 objectives. And again, they have given the scope of this case study. The audit was conducted on crop intensification program of Rwanda Agriculture Development Agency (RADA) under Minagrai, based finding on both secondary and primary data. And next I am going to find out how they have gathered the data. They have gathered the data on certain literatures they have used. They are in the appendix. They are going through certain articles, and primary data they have visited about 5 districts, and they have formed a questionnaire, and from questionnaire they have gathered the vital information.
Thank you.